The 60s in Winnipeg. Rock and roll sweeps the baby boom generation. Scores of bands play community clubs across the city. Burton Cummings and the Deverons, and Chad Allen and the Reflections.
The embryonic rock scene was that of a beehive of music going on. There was like, you had your north end, you had your south end, you had your downtown. It was sort of like districts, and each area had bands, and they had like their favorite band.
Into this vibrant music scene arrives a 14-year-old kid from Toronto. His name is Neil Young, and he attends Earl Grey School. One of his teachers, Mr. Yarmy, remembers the tall kid from the East.
He was a very quiet kid, and he was tall. He was a tall, thin guy, and he didn't even fit into the regular desk. We had the desks were probably all the same size, but he was tall, and so he had no room for his knees. So what he did, he would slouch. He slouched, and his feet were way up in front. So what we had to do, especially in my room, was to walk around him. He was a good kid, but as long as you left him to his tricks, whatever, he was okay.
At Earl Grey, Neil becomes the co-editor of the yearbook.
He always wanted to be the center, and if you look at some of the yearbook pictures, he was always at the center. One of the poems or verses he wrote here, he was a great guy for chewing gum, and chewing gum was forbidden in my class. But he had a way of chewing gum that you didn't know that he was chewing gum. And so, in fact, he even wrote a little verse or a little article. Some people like to chew gum. I'm one of them. Chewing gum, in my opinion, is something to do when I'm nervous. Playing golf, notice, or just doing nothing. This makes me proud. You see, I'm never caught doing nothing. When I might be caught doing nothing, I'm chewing gum. That's why I chew gum, signed by Neil Young.
But Neil is interested in music, and at Earl Grey, he quickly pursues his passion.
Within a couple of months of arriving, he met kids at Earl Grey School, and it's sort of the old story. The neighborhood kids get together in someone's basement, and you play guitar, and I'll play drums, and someone will play bass, and they put a band together. His first band was called the Jades.
One of the original members of the Jades is his friend and classmate, John Daniel.
Neil and I were in grade 9 together. I heard he had a membership at Niagara Golf and Country Club, and I wanted to learn something of the game. So how do I get this guy to take me and show me what at that time would be the experience of my life? And I had no gifts to set before the king except what I knew of the guitar. So gladly he consented, and I played Niagara, and I hope at least he learned something of the guitar at the time.
But the Jades are short-lived, performing only once at the Earl Grey Community Club before breaking up.
From the Jades, he then went on to, he played in a band called the Esquires, which is another Fort Rouge band, and they tried him on bass because he couldn't play guitar very well, and he couldn't even play bass, so they kicked him out. And he did one gig with Carmen LaRosa and the Thunderstorms, and they threw him out because he wasn't any good. But I mean, he never lost that determination. He just kept bouncing back.
Good afternoon, Forage Travel.
Carmen LaRosa of the 60s band The Thunderstorms now runs a travel agency. Back then, he needed a bass player, so he recruited Neil Young.
It was difficult in the sense of communicating with him at that time. He was, like I say, pretty withdrawn individual. And he has a certain, I mean, you can identify him because he has a certain kind of voice. I don't particularly like his singing, to be honest,
But criticism doesn't deter Neil. He goes on to Calvin High School, forming many other bands, including the Classics, the Twilighters, the Stardusters, and eventually the Squires in 1962. They played the busy community club circuit around Winnipeg, gaining a popular following. Chad Allen and the Reflections was another popular band of that era. One of the members was Randy Bachman, and Neil admired him.
Neil really liked Randy's playing, his style of playing, and I think he tried to get a lot of lessons from Randy, but I don't think Randy had too much time to give him lessons. And so he would go and stand and just watch him and see what he could cop from being out in front and watching him play.
Glenn McRae played in a band called the Crescendos. They shared a studio space with Neil Young and the Squires.
He kind of went off in a different direction. He started writing his own songs and was criticized heavily for it because it just wasn't the thing to do. And I don't think he did it with the sense that this was going to help him make it, because I don't think we thought of it in those terms in those days. I think he just wanted to write songs. I think they were in him. And he made the people that were with him play his songs, and that was it.
When friends fall out.
Although the Guess Who were achieving international stardom, Neil was planning his own road to success. Lynn Buchanan remembers a conversation with him in 1964.
It was high school graduation. After the party at Grant Park, a whole group of us went back to my parents' house and had a party. And at some point during the party, Neil and I were upstairs in the kitchen talking, and he said he wasn't going to go to university, that he was going to go to LA and make it big. And I said, oh, really?
The thing about Neil was he realized at an early age that if you really wanted to do this business, you could learn it here, but you couldn't do the business here. And so the next thing I heard of him, he had packed up, gone to Toronto, and then from Toronto he had leaped into California, and I heard a recording by Buffalo Springfield, and lo and behold, there was Neil Young in amongst the Buffalo Springfield.
There's something happening here.
Buffalo Springfield was only the beginning. Young went on to bands that changed rock music. He played with Crosby, Stills and Nash at Woodstock, started Crazy Horse, formed Neil Young and the Blue Notes after the Winnipeg Cafe and Music Spot. In 1992, he recorded Prairie Town with his old mentor, Randy Bachman.
Born and raised in a prairie town, just a kid full of dreams.
30 years after jumping into his trademark black hearse and leaving Winnipeg for good, Neil Young is one of the most admired figures in rock and roll, an icon to generations of music lovers. His changes are legendary, but throughout his remarkable career, he's remained true to what he first discovered in the community clubs of Winnipeg, that music was his soul and best self, and as long as he sung what he knew, he would remain forever young.